the way people connect with each other, sometimes with words, sometimes just with body language. But I want you to think about how does it feel in the classroom when you think about climate. Any other word on here that you would like explained in a different way? So equity and justice. So when you think of equity, I'd like you to think about fairness. And justice, I want you to think about doing right by students. So fairness and doing what is right, doing what is just. Okay, so then what I'd like you to do, there's 7 things that are up here. I'd like you to choose 2 that you would like to spend time discussing. And then we're going to do show of hands. All right. And we're going to see which 2 or 3 things have the most interest from the room. And then that's how we'll start for the afternoon. So you get 2 votes, not 3, not 4, 2. That's it. 2. Whatever 2 you want, just 2. Class climate is the feelings of the classroom, the emotions, the energy. How does it feel when you're in the classroom?
What about instructional strategy?
Those are ways that teachers can teach. Different instruction strategies, so different practices for instruction. Okay. Think about the 2 that you want to vote for. You can look at me and smile when you've got your 2, and then I'll know when the voting is going to begin. All right. Those who are voting for content knowledge, raise their hand. Okay. Those who are voting for instructional strategy, raise their hand. Okay. Those who are voting classroom management, raise your hands. Yeah, that's also a number. Okay. Those who are voting classroom climate, raise your hands. Social emotional learning.
3 it is.
Equity and justice. Wellness. Maybe. It's like a little bit less than a star compared to the other ones. Okay. All right. Then we're going to use this as a timer. 1, 2, 3, 4 divided by 6. 6-minute timer. Timer's on. Spin that. Instructional strategies. And I'm going to try and hold your attention while sitting in a chair. We'll see how this goes. All right. It's 3 o'clock. When we reflect on the seerah and look at ways that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was delivering his message to the people, we have many, many instructional strategies that we can draw on for our classrooms today. Let's talk about one, centering the student. Imam al-Ghazali writes a lot about this, the need to center the classroom around the needs of the students. Imam al-Ghazali tells us that when you look at the prophetic tradition, we are noticing, focusing on the needs of individuals as learners, individuals. This means that we as teachers have to pay attention to the levels of our students to know what we need to be teaching them. But we also pay attention to the context that the student is in. Here's a very good example. I told you a story when I first started this morning about that little 5th grade girl in my Sunday school class who asked me for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's last name. Do you remember that story?
Yeah.
And you remember I told you a little bit more that I learned about her context? How should I have started to teach that girl, now that I knew a little bit more about her context. She was 10 years old in my 5th grade class. Raise your hands and tell me, what is something you think I should have done as her teacher now that I knew more about her context? Pretend she was in your class. What would you do now that you know this?
Explain to her
Explain what?
about she asking about Allah Subhanahu wa Taala last name.
Yes. So what would you explain? What would any of you explain? A 10-year-old girl, 5th grade Sunday school, and that's the question she asked me on the way to lunch.
Like basic, very basic information.
Why? Why would you do basic information?
Because she's asking like very simple question, like the last name of Allah. It's like I don't know. It's just basic question.
It's basic question, and what about her context tells you this 10-year-old girl, not a 5-year-old child, a 10-year-old girl needs basic information. Her mom just converted. If any of you are teaching 10-year-olds, if I were a betting woman, and I'm not a betting woman, but if I were a betting woman, I would bet that you all assume that your 10-year-old children have been Muslim for 10 years. That for 10 years they've been seeing people make wudu. 10 years they've been seeing people pray. 10 years they've been reading this book called the Quran. But if you knew that your 10-year-old child just learned about Islam last month when mama came home and said, I'm now going to be a Muslim, you would teach that child differently. Not bad, just different, because the child has different needs. This is a prophetic instructional strategy. Think about the man who urinated in the masjid and how Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam taught him through teaching the companions how to let him know what the masjid was for. There's another instructional strategy that I've seen of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam of using questions to get people to understand perspective. Do you remember the hadith where the man came and asked Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam for permission to commit adultery? Rasulullah's response wasn't, you disgusting pig, you foul man, you bad person. No, he said, would you want this for your mother? Would you want this for your sister? Would you want this for your daughter? And by bringing in that context, the man realized, well, no, I wouldn't want it for any of those relations of mine. And then he said, well, then you wouldn't want that for anyone else's mother or sister or daughter. So he brought in questioning in order to teach this man the foul, the harm, the injustice of adultery. Or have you heard the hadith where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam put his hand between the hands of a companion when teaching him from the Quran? Physically put his hand in between the other person's hand, that physical touch before talking and teaching about the Quran. Or remember the hadith where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam sits down with the companions and a stranger comes in and asks, which of you is the prophet? He asked because the prophet wasn't wearing a crown. The prophet wasn't in a big chair with lots of jewels around. That was 5 minutes. No, that was 6. Think about you in your classroom. Do you sit in a manner that keeps you in community with your students? Do you use questions to bring logic to help them understand what you want to teach them? Do you bring patience and understanding when they do something that you think is wrong, but maybe they didn't realize it was wrong? Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam also taught through repetition. We also see this in the Quran, all the different times that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us the same thing throughout the Quran. Repetition is part of our prophetic tradition. It doesn't mean that children aren't paying attention. It's part of our prophetic tradition to teach things multiple times through repetition. There's another prophetic tradition of teaching through memorization. Teaching through memorization, having students memorize, and then the understanding can follow. The Quran is a beautiful teacher of stories. Our beloved Prophet ﷺ would also teach through stories. Stories of creation, stories of people long ago, stories of other prophets. These stories were not done to entertain. He wasn't a prophet of entertainment. The stories were taught to teach. So when you're thinking about instructional strategies that are going to increase student engagement, using the developmental norms of the students that you're teaching, think about storytelling, repetition, touch, questions, analogies, recitation, drawing. There's examples of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam drawing in the sand, drawing on his hand. These are all different instructional strategies, more than just standing up, opening the book. Boys and girls, it's time to read page 23. Look at the top of the paper. Read with me as I read out loud. That's not going to get their curiosity. There's nothing to be curious about. You can see exactly what's on page 23. It's not very interesting if you read the page 22 last week, and it doesn't promote this optimism of hopefulness of what to learn. And I don't meet many students who are passionate about workbooks. Now, I know workbooks are necessary and we need them, but there's other ways that we can teach that are going to keep the students engaged. Any questions on some of those instructional strategies? And yes, they're for ages 5 to 18 and for you grown-ups, because a couple hours ago you were over here playing and laughing like 7-year-olds over a greeting called the 1-minute greeting. So everybody likes to play. Everybody likes a story. Everybody likes to do something different in order to learn. No one likes to just sit there and be told what is important.
How we handle any distraction while we apply the distraction?
Oh, good. Tell me a good example of a distraction that you have to manage in your class.
On the age that have this they hiding for, then hiding and then move around, come back, then playing hiding upon the phone again.
Yeah. So playing with the phone is a very different distraction than moving over there. All right. And so I want you all to be thinking, what are the distractions that stop the learning from taking place? And then what are other distractions that we just need to ignore? For instance, some of you have gotten up from your chair while I've been teaching. I just want you to know that. Some of you have gotten up. You have all not sat still in a chair while I've been teaching. Some of you got up to throw something in the trash can. Some of you got up to go get more water or something to drink. Some of you just got up and went out those doors, and I don't know where you were going. And I ignored it. And the reason I ignored it is I assume you were moving for a purpose. It didn't distract the rest of the learning that the rest of us were doing. And for most part, you came back to your seats and you continued to learn. By me ignoring it, I continue to move the classroom forward and create an environment for you to come back. Sometimes people just need to stretch their legs, and so they figure, let me just make some trash and then I can walk to the trash can. So some things it's better to ignore. Now, when it's time to start doing work and you start leaving and going here and going there, then yes, you can approach it differently. Typically, if it's a one-on-one behavior, then I'm going to get close to you and I'm going to talk to you about sitting down and getting started. But if I stay up here in front of everybody and I tell you, sit down and get your work done, You, because you're 10 to 15 years old, you do not like being embarrassed in front of your friends. That is one of your social and emotional developmental traits. It's very different from a 5-year-old. 5-year-olds don't care if their friend sees them wet their pants. Like, they don't care. But a teenager is absolutely going to care about anything that could look embarrassing in front of their friends. That teenager is going to shut down and get mad at you because you embarrass them in front of their friends. So be very mindful about what behaviors you need to correct when you're up front and what things we just need to talk about when I'm here. I need you to move your plate off the desk because it's time to write. Only me and him need to know that the plate doesn't need to be on the table when it's time to write. The rest of you don't need to know. Can we go to the next one?
Yes.
Classroom management. Oh, we talked about some of these prophetic responses. We talked about teacher proximity. Moving our bodies physically closer to somebody helps manage a classroom. So even if I see that the two of you're not talking, let's say the two of you are talking here and I'm just going to continue to teach from here, I don't even need to tell her stop talking to her friend. Just by getting close, she tends to stop talking and start looking at me, right? If you are writing when I didn't want you to be writing, I could be standing here and just reminding you we're reading from this page and she's already put her pen down, right? So sometimes proximity can help to manage a classroom in a way that maintains a child's self-esteem and sense of wholeness. You didn't embarrass them, all right? Touching can also be a tool of classroom management, but it has to be done in a gentle, loving manner, right? So I had an experience a couple months ago. I was teaching a class at American University, and a student started to cry. I can tell you what the topic was later, but I went to touch her like this, and she shuddered, all right, because she wasn't expecting me to lean in with a touch. And it reminded me, one, not everybody sees touch as something that's soothing, and the child needs to know to expect it, right? Like there's got to be some permission and some consent there, because even the gentlest of touch can really make somebody uncomfortable. Like if I go and touch the imam, he's going to come back, but because culturally he's not expecting me to touch him in order to show kindness and consideration. So have a context and an understanding when you're using touch in the classroom. But when appropriate, the idea of touching a child when they're reciting Quran is a prophetic tradition. Touching somebody as a way to help calm them or center them is a prophetic tradition. So when done well, you can use that. Calling a child's name. So it is a prophetic tradition to call someone's name to get their attention. There's a hadith where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, Mu'adh. And Mu'adh responds, yes, Rasulullah. Then he calls again, Mu'adh. And Mu'adh responds, yes, Rasulullah. And I think he calls his name third time, Mu'adh. Yes, Rasulullah. And then at that point, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said what he wanted Mu'adh to know. He called his name 3 times to catch his attention. His tone was even. It wasn't Mu'adh! Mu'adh! It wasn't that, right? It was a gentle way of I'm calling your name, you reply back to me, I call you, you call back to me. The modern teacher would have done it your way. 1, 2, 3, eyes on me. And then everybody's supposed to say, what is it? 1, 2, eyes on you. If she loses her cool and says 1, 2, 3, eyes on, right? That's not prophetic. You're losing your patience there. But the call and response is prophetic in nature. It's done to invite someone to listen, but your tone and the way that you repeat can be prophetic, or it can be the opposite of prophetic. And then there's one other example I had for classroom management. Oh, simply with repetitions, directions, clarity. When you are managing a classroom, and hopefully you've seen me try to model that here. When I put these words up, I asked, did anybody want me to explain anything further? I didn't ask, is there anybody here who doesn't know what this word means? Do you hear the difference? The first way I said, is there anybody who wants me to explain something more? I did not say, is there somebody who doesn't know what one of these words means? Because in managing the classroom, I want you all to feel welcome. I don't want you to see, she put something on the board and I don't know what that means. And now she wants me to admit I don't know what it means. And I have to tell everybody I don't know what it means. And maybe I'm not supposed to be in this class. Right? Our self-esteem as learners is very important. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam knew that even in the companions, their self-esteem, their sense of wholeness was important. He never taught people and made them feel small, never made them feel shamed. Oh yes, he taught right from wrong. He wasn't weak in that way, but you didn't feel like you had been harmed in his presence. So when we manage our classrooms, we need to manage with love and understanding. That's why I wanted you to do the developmental norms. You have to know your students in order to know how to manage them. If you try and manage them out of their traditional norms, you're fighting against something like fighting against the waves of an ocean. You have to know what is normal, typical development for students, and you either ride the wave with them or you're going to drown. All right? So prophetic classroom management honors the individual differences and similarities of people, children, and manages accordingly. Asset-based, loving, kindness. And that's still a very strong attribute in a classroom. Structural management, classroom management, social emotional learning. How do many of you teach students to be kind in your classroom? Right? Like, let's think all the things that Muslims are supposed to be. We're supposed to be kind, respectful, obedient, faithful, patient. How do we teach those social emotional skills in a classroom? You do it? Absolutely, you do it. That's definitely the prophetic tradition. So much of what we've learned from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was not just learning by listening to him and what came out of his mouth. It was observing him and seeing how he moved about society, how he interacted with children, with women, his wives, other women, other people in the community, strangers from afar, enemies who were trying to kill him. We were able to see him move about with all different people. And so by observing him, we learned social norms of what we're supposed to be doing as a Muslim. And if we're responsible for student engagement, we said we were in charge of the classroom. The hardest thing about teaching Sunday school is that our students are watching us. We are the textbook our students will always read. Always. It will mean absolutely nothing if you tell the children to respect somebody else in the classroom and you are not modeling respect for yourself, respect yourself. It's very difficult to teach children to be kind. It's very difficult to teach children to be kind, but you can show kindness. They can feel kindness so that they can recognize kindness. Other than modeling, what else can we do to teach the social emotional skills that a Muslim needs? have sympathy for our children, particularly when we are understanding their developmental progress. You said stories? You said stories? That's a beautiful contribution to this. When we teach stories, we can talk about different social realities and different emotions, what to do when someone is angry, sad, grieving, confused, hurt. My Quran teachers, this is your gift. If you are only teaching Quran so that the children can memorize the words, you've missed such a beautiful treasure. Quran teachers are able to teach these social emotional skills in ways that the rest of us will always struggle because you have the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Just the etiquette of opening the Quran, the adab that it takes to sit there and read and reflect on the Quran, to be able to talk about the beauty of the Quran. These attributes the children are going to grow and see in you and be able to model in themselves. But teaching children how to be Muslim in this American lifestyle, it's very difficult if all we do is talk about it. We have to do it. I was talking to a group of teachers in the fall, and we were talking about this violence across Gaza. And we were talking about how sad it made us feel, how we felt lost, how we could see this horror over there. We knew it was horribly bad, but we felt here in America, there was nothing we could do. We just have to watch this horror on social media and feel frozen here in America. If we start talking about this with our older students, not our little ones, it's not developmentally appropriate for them. But if we start talking with our older students about how we are managing being an American Muslim at this time, then we open up another way for these students to be engaged. We can tap into their passion and their interests. Young people are also struggling how to manage going to school with all this that is erupted in the world. So we can talk about what we're doing when we have to get up and go to work every day, and we can ask them, what are you doing when you get up and go to school every day? Right? So those social emotional skills of how to be an American Muslim at this time often comes through discussion and modeling. Every one of these kids going to a public school has had conversations or maybe even seen drugs and alcohol. So talk to them. How do you do it? How do you abstain from drugs and alcohol when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us to do it and it's everywhere in the public schools? How do you manage? I can tell you what I do at work. Why don't you talk about what you're doing in middle school and high school? Those social skills that we need to be Muslim when the society around us is not. Or what about the fact that in every middle school and high school, we have dances and parties, all to encourage boyfriend, girlfriend, boyfriend, boyfriend, girlfriend, girlfriend relationships before marriage? And we have them in our workplaces. So how do we talk and think about moving through society as an American Muslim? How do we make our decisions? And then how are they making their decisions? And can we talk about that? So discussion, modeling, the Quran, these are different ways to teach the social emotional skills of being Muslim in America today. No one has had to do this before. Even if you all tell me that you went to public school in America when you were a child, I know you weren't a child in the year 2024 with Trump going up for re-election and a war breaking out in so many parts of the Muslim world. None of you were in this situation when you were young. Our young people are facing something none of us have ever had to face before. So we don't know what it means to do this work of being an American Muslim today. We all have to figure this out together. So talking with our young people, high school, middle school. That's what these children need in order to grow their social emotional capacities of being an American Muslim. It connects to one of our prophetic traditions of teaching sensitive topics. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not shy away from teaching sensitive topics. The example that I like to give is an example of a woman who came to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and asked a question about menstruation, and he gave an answer to her. We know that our prophet was a prophet for all people, not just for men. So we as teachers need to remember we are teaching all of our students, the students who have to see drugs and alcohol at school, the students who have to face the LGBTQ plus stuff at school, the students who have to face dating at school, the students who are facing all this kind of stuff. We are their teacher. So if we say that we're not going to talk about, think about, read about these things that the students are dealing with, then we are not tapping into what they need from us now. And they need help being an American Muslim today. And that means all the realities of the yucky stuff that's out there and, God forbid, not be in here. Any questions on the instructional strategies, the class management, or the social emotional learning? And then I'll just say one last thing for the wellness. But any questions? Wellness. When you look at the Shama'il, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was known as somebody who was smiling, easygoing, calm personality. He stayed away from things that displeased him and did not concern him. But yet he was the leader of our Muslim ummah. He was making decisions about war and peace and building a community. He had a whole lot on his plate, as we would say today, a whole lot on his shoulders. But yet he was known as being smiley and easygoing. For us as classroom teachers, we have to make sure that we are well in order to show up in our classrooms for our students to be the teachers they need us to be. For people like myself, that means making sure I sleep enough. For sometimes it means making sure that I drink enough water during the day. Other people, it's making sure they eat every couple of hours so that their blood sugar stays stable. Whatever you need to do to make sure you are well will make sure that you have the ability and the capacity to smile from the time those children come into madrasah to the time that they leave. And then, God willing, the time it takes you to get home and to be with your family, inshallah. We need you to be well so that you can be easygoing. So that when these children have a problem, they think about you as someone that they can go to, in addition to the members of their family, inshallah. But if we think about what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam communicated to his companions and how he communicated, and think about his rest and rejuvenation, time he took to reflect and be away from people in the cave of Hira. Many different attributes we have from the Sirah about taking care of ourselves, and we do this so we can be strong for the community. We need you teachers, you beautiful, smart, capable teachers who have been called to be with these children now in this society at this time. We need you to be well so that you can do this work of supporting these young people, this work of managing their engagement and knowing who they are so that you can deliver the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his messenger. All right, so I'm going to stop here, see if there's any last questions. We've got to take a picture because clearly history needs to be recorded in this moment, inshallah. And then we'll pause so that you all can take this in, and go forth, inshallah, and have a beautiful rest of this academic year, inshallah. All right? Comments, questions? Oh, yes. Can I put the website here? So www.contemporaryislam.org. And if you go there to teaching, then you can navigate to our webpage and you can always see what courses we have running. Okay. All right.
I have a question. Last time after we got a training like this, we got certificate. Do you think a certificate like before? No, we can provide that. Yeah, because last time.
Yeah, I don't think I provided it last time. I think IMAAM Center provided it last time.
IT was given to us. Yeah, that's IMAAM. No, triple IT. She was
Oh, when it was triple IT.
Yeah,
Yeah, triple IT did that. Yeah. So I'm gonna see if you all here at IMAAM Center can document this through a certificate for the teachers, particularly since you all have signed in and you've been here for these hours. But I don't have that. I'm gonna rely on IMAAM Center. I can help sign it. Yeah. Please.
School setting affect
100% school setting affects it. 100%. That's why we have to do these type of trainings together. We have to talk together. We have to agree, do you all want to make IMAAM Center a space of prophetic classrooms? And then if so, how can you all support each other to do this? It will never work if you try and do this in your classroom and the rest of them give up. It will just never work. It has to be the community working on this together. As one of you had said, as you had said earlier, I think we're not the prophet, right? Like we can never reach his level of perfection. So that means we all are going to be imperfect. We all are going to constantly be in a state of trying, but we can help each other because we're all not trying in the same ways. Some of us are much better at certain things than others, but we can support each other. But absolutely, the environment matters. Yeah.
Can you share your experience? What is your best experience of like inspiring kids to do what you do?
I think it's a different approach, I think, for the different ages. I remember when I taught Sunday school in that third grade class, we were supposed to learn about prayer, how to pray. I went to the masjid with my students. We walked out of the classroom and we went to the masjid. Literally just walked out of the room and turned the hall and went to the masjid. They loved it. They loved being in the masjid. They loved being on the rugs and being able to pray like the grown-ups instead of learning to pray in the classroom. Just that change of environment. I remember teaching the children about the adhan. We went outside and called the adhan with our loud voice. No one wants to practice the adhan in a classroom and use their indoor voice. You want to go outside and call it like Bilal. You got to call it so that people can hear. And one at a time, we were calling the adhan outside. Now, I don't know if that inspired them, but it definitely had their attention. We were passionate. It was fun. And we kept practicing over and over until we learned how to recite the Quran. I've seen classrooms with older students having deep discussions with the teacher about some issue that they were facing, and the teacher showed them how to find a solution from the Quran, and then they talked about it. Really talked about this thing that they were facing that was troubling them. And when they left, they didn't necessarily have the answers to everything, but they felt less alone because now they realize their friends in other schools are managing similar situations, and they know that there's a group of people trying to manage it the same way. And they know that their teacher has their back. Their teacher was listening, talking about what's different or what's the same from when they were younger, what they're experiencing in their workplace now. But I just remember the feeling of We see each other. We're connecting with each other. And nobody was getting distracted by the cell phones. So I just think it's about the age and the stage of a child's development or the children's development to know what is going to engage them in the art of learning. It has to be real. For all of you, it has to be real as adults. If I teach you something and you don't see how it connects to your real life, you're really going to check out. If I start teaching you now about calculus and I'm not connecting it to what you all need, you're all going to need to go to the bathroom. Everybody's going to want to get some coffee and tea. People are going to say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I got to leave early. My kids are calling me. I'm going to be in here alone." But if you make the material connect to a person's real life, that's one way to catch their interest and spark their curiosity. That's what I want you all to take. Learn what your children are interested in and teach that. You can teach about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in so many pathways. Find the way that interests your students. Just have them make friends and be Muslim. That's the best you can do in a madrasah. Don't worry about the memorization, the content knowledge of this and that. Just teach them to be Muslim and to have Muslim friends. That is very, very hard. Look around you. We are losing our children from the deen. So make this place a place that the children love coming, they love being with other Muslims, and they love learning about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you waste their time and push them away because you wanted to do what you wanted to do, not what they're curious about, they will walk out of this and not come back. Maybe not now while they're 10, but definitely when they have the capacity to walk. And all of us know this. We've all seen it. Love these children and help them be Muslim. That's it. Inshallah. Okay, that's it.
So it's very, very interesting and then very valuable for us. And hopefully, inshallah, we can get more topic for the future, inshallah.
Inshallah. Thank you. May Allah accept it from all of us. Inshallah. All right. Assalamu alaikum.
Nama siapa? Oleh siapa? Oh, ya.